What's up everyone, it's your girl Brian Shanae, and today I'll be doing a book review, and it's going to be for Take My Hand by Dolen Perkins-Valdez. This is one of the books that I have read recently in June, and I wanted to do a book review specifically about this book because this book is amazing, but it's also realistic, and it's also something that is still occurring to this very day, and it is the year 2022. So let's go ahead and get started with this book review. Now, before I begin, I would like to say there are content warnings in this book where it talks about women and children being sterilized. And what I mean by being sterilized is that they are getting their tubes tied pretty much without their consent, without their knowing, or they are sterilizing little girls that are around like 9-10 years old who have not even started their cycle, have not had any children, have not been sexually active, or has started their cycle and hasn't been sexually active, and so they are being sterilized. So I do want to let you know that prior to me reviewing this book. But anyways, so before I get started with my book review, I do want to read the author's note because I think it's very beneficial for you to know what the story is based upon before I get started. So it says, for the author notes, this novel is a work of fiction loosely inspired by the real-life case of Ralph versus Weinberger. In June 1973, Minnie Lee and Mary Alice Ralph, sisters aged 12 and 14, were sterilized without their consent in Montgomery, Alabama, by a federally funded agency. Outraged by this terrible violation, their social worker, Jessie Bly, reported it to a local attorney. Eventually, the case went to federal court in Washington, D.C. The lead lawyer for the plaintiffs was Joseph Levin Jr. of the Southern Poverty Law Center. This case is considered a pivotal moment in the history of reproductive injustice, as it brought to light the thousands of poor women of color across the country who had been sterilized under federally funded programs. What was particularly shocking to me when I first learned of this case was that it had happened just 1 year after that Associated Press had revealed the story of how the federal government left hundreds of black men in rural Alabama untreated for syphilis in a study at Tuskegee that lasted 4 decades. Both cases prompted national discussions about medical ethics and racism, but how could these events have been allowed to happen in plain sight? I began to ask questions about culpability and silence that contemporaneous documents in the archive could not answer. My inability to shake these questions resulted in 3 years of research and ultimately this novel. Eager to seek more answers, I traveled to Montgomery to speak with Joseph Levin and Jessie Bly, who were so generous with their time. I'm always led by my curiosity, and I found myself wondering about the nurses who worked at the Montgomery Family Planning Clinic. How did they make sense of what happened on their watch? I was never able to find first-hand accounts of nurses who worked there, so I decided to imagine what it must have been like to work there at the time. Thus, I created the characters of Sybil Townsend and the other nurses at the clinic, and Sybil Townsend is going to be one of the main characters in this book. It is important to note that Take My Hand is not a retelling of these events. Instead, I have used the historical record as inspiration to imagine the emotional impact of this moment and others like it. The moral and ethical questions I explore in Take My Hand remains salient today. In 2013, the Center for Investigative Reporting revealed that between 2006 and 2010, nearly 150 women in California's state prisons have been sterilized without official approval. A year later, the Associated Press reported on multiple instances of prosecutors in Nashville, Tennessee, submitting permanent birth control as part of plea deals. In 2020, a whistleblower alleged that immigrant women detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is ICE, were being forcibly sterilized without their consent in U.S. detainment facilities. In fact, compulsory sterilization of unfit inmates of public institutions is still federally protected by a 1927 U.S. Supreme Court ruling, Buck versus Bell. Reproductive justice, a phrase coined by Black feminists at a conference in 1994, remains elusive for African American women who struggle to access affordable health care due to social and economic inequalities. The abortion rate for Black women is nearly 5 times that for white women. African American women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. Furthermore, health conditions that disproportionately affect Black women, such as uterine fibroids, receive very little government research funding. My hope is that this novel will provoke discussions about culpability in a society that still deems poor, Black, and disabled as categories unfit for motherhood. In a world inundated by information about these tragedies and more, I so passionately believe in the power of the novel and its readers to raise alarm, influence hearts, and impact lives. So I wanted to read the author's notes before I get into this book because it heavily talks about these issues. But with this book, it mentions Sybil Townsend, who is the main character in this book, and she is a nurse. She just graduated from college, and she works for this clinic. And the owner of this clinic, or her manager at this time, is a white woman, and she wants to, you know, help women as best as she can, so she says. So Sybil goes to her first two clients, and they're girls that live in the country. One girl, she's 11 years old, and her name is India. Then you have a 13-year-old named Erica. So she gets to see them, and she realizes their circumstances and how they are living, how the girls, they have, you know, they're living in poverty at this time. Their dad is barely getting work. He's trying to get jobs, and he can't seem to save one, or the job ends up firing him. So he can't keep a job. They have a grandmother who's still mourning for her daughter, which is the girl's mother, because she had passed away. So she's seeing that they're living in poverty. She sees the conditions of the girls and how it looks like their hair hasn't been done, and all that. But before she even gets into being in their lives and getting them assistance as far as assistant living, you know, she's there to help the girls, because one of the, you know, her boss, Mrs. Steger, I believe that's the name, she's saying that these girls need to get their shots. So, you know, like birth control. So she talks to the girls. India doesn't speak, but her older sister, Erica, does. And Erica was explaining to her that she does have her period, and she has it every single day. And she doesn't understand how that is possible. And so even with her younger sister, she hasn't even started her cycle yet. So she's asked, you know, the sisters these questions. Has anybody touched you, recently touched you, anything like that? They said no. So she gave them the shots, but then literally she regretted giving them these shots, because she did some research and she was trying to figure out, this is not mapping, this is not making any sense. So she regretted her decision on doing that in the first place. But she did also, after she gave the girls the shots, she did also help them getting assistance as far as living, because they weren't living great. You know, and food was they didn't hardly have any food either. So Sybil, which is SIV, like civil rights, not Sybil, but Sybil, she helped them get what they needed and the support that they needed. And then her boss told her, like, yeah, they're due for another shot. And she's like, no, in her head, she's saying like, no, they don't, but I'll just have them listed as they got the other shot, because she doesn't believe these two girls should get another shot. No. And then one day, you know, as like I said, Sybil is pretty much taking care of these girls. She's been through a lot herself, and I will say that also content warning in this book is abortions, because that's what the decision that Sybil makes at this time, you know, in this book, because she wasn't ready to become a mother, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to be a mother. She also went through a relationship with her best friend, a child friend who grew up together, and it just, she wasn't ready. She wasn't ready for that. But she took these girls as if they were her own. So she even got Erica, India into school as well, because they weren't in school at the time either. And this is happening in the year of 1973. And then we have moments where it goes into the present, which is 2016, when Sybil is and she's like 73 or 74 years old. And she's recollecting all this information, going back to what happened and the decisions that she had made that she regrets. So one day she's getting ready to pick up the girls from school, and they weren't there. So she went home. The grandmother said, yeah, they went to pick her up because they needed their shots. And she's like, what shots? What are you talking about? They're not supposed to. So she's like, yeah, Miss Steger took them to a hospital. And this hospital is not great at all. It's terrible, especially how they treat Black people. At this hospital, particularly that Miss Steger took these girls to, they treat them like crap. They're terrible. It's a terrible hospital. Terrible treatment towards Black people. So Sybil is on her way to the hospital, and then she sees the girls in their hospital room, and they are in pain, and then come to find out they were sterilized. And Sybil asked the grandmother, did you sign anything? Yes, we did sign something, but come to find out, neither the grandmother nor the dad could read. You know, they were giving them a gist of the situation. First, they said they were giving a shot, and that was a lie. They sterilized these girls, an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. They haven't even had children yet, and you are doing that to girls. I had to put the book down because it was just, because I'm a mother, and how can you do that to kids? Like, what comes to your mind? Like, why? And you know, the owner, you know, Mrs. Steger, felt like she was doing the right thing, and Sybil's like, no, you did the wrong thing. And then come to find out, her friend Alicia, that works for the same clinic, pretty much told Miss Steger that they did not get their shots. And you know, Sybil and Alicia had a rough patch at the moment, but Alicia knew what she had done, and she knew that was wrong. So Sybil found an attorney, and they went to court, and they went into the federal court. And it destroys me, because even today, this country, the US, is still doing this to women and children. And then, of course, you talk about eugenics, how in Tuskegee, they were pretty much testing men to see how their bodies would do since they have syphilis. Was not even trying to treat them whatsoever. Wanted to see, you know, how they reacted differently towards it, right? They did not help these men. When I tell you, like, I was in tears, because I was. And I was disgusted because this is still happening. And I'm like, what country do I live in? Like, this country is trash. Like, trash. And it's crazy, because this is during the time with Roe versus Wade, where they're trying to overturn it. And I'm like, why is this country, why is the government doing this? We're supposed to be stepping forward to a better future, but you want to go back to the past? That's disgusting. It's unacceptable. And they say with sterilizing and stuff, women and all this, it's constitutional. Constitutional, my ass. Like, I was in tears. And then I even marked a couple pages, because during the time where they were in court, you know, with the hearing and stuff like that, they had people to testify, even doctors. So it says here, like, I know this is spoilery, but I do apologize. This is really in depth, and this is a serious, this is a serious discussion, like a serious topic, and it's a discussion that needs to constantly be had, because people are sleeping on it, and it definitely needs to be had. So it says, a woman who had been sitting in the back row stood. I had assumed she was a local, an onlooker like me. I waited impatiently for her to be sworn in. I had been around enough of my dad's Mahari friends to have met black women doctors, but even I had to admit there had not been many. Dr. Robert, please state your position and title. I am Director of Research at the Health Policy Advisory Center in Washington, D.C. It says a PhD or a medical doctor, or both. I wish Lou could clarify. The woman intrigued me. What has your research revealed about the rates of sterilization in this country? Mr. Feldman, we have found that sterilization is the rule, not the exception. It is a widely endemic in this country. It is a form of reproductive control. I was like, wow, it's just crazy how much this country wants to control people, and they want to have a say on what somebody should do or should not do with their own body. Yeah. And then we go to the next page. It says, last year we did a survey and found that although 2/3 of federally funded clinics patients are white and only 1/3 are black, 43% of those sterilized are black. A report from the U.S. government, she pointed at the government lawyers, found that between the summer of 1972 and the summer of 1973, 25,000 adults were sterilized in federally funded clinics. Of those, 153 were under the age of 18. And then it says, in North Carolina, between 1960 and 1968, of the 1,620 sterilizations that occurred, 63% were performed on black women. And it says, yeah, and 55% of those were teens. And it's sad. It's just heartbreaking why this country In the year 2022, they're still doing this and trying to overturn Roe versus Wade, telling women what they should and should not do with their bodies. It's just crazy to me. And then to the next page, it says, our findings show that HEW's numbers are grossly underestimated. Our research revealed that over the past few years, nearly 150,000 low-income women from all over the nation have been sterilized under federally funded programs. And this is what this book is mostly about. It's about Sybil Townsend knowing she's a nurse, but she knows that this is wrong. And not all nurses are bad, but I feel like us as women, we need to say something, because this should not be happening. And then, like, for me, I'm a mother of 3. With my daughter, my first, when I found out I was pregnant with her, I went to, because someone had referred me to a doctor. I didn't know who they were. They were saying that they were great, yada, yada, yada. So I went there. And then literally when I walked in, as I was walking in, there was a woman there. She said, I think I'm pregnant. Something is moving inside of me. Can you please help me? They turned her away, and she was Black. They turned her away saying that we can't help you. You need to schedule an appointment first. And I'm the only person in there. So from just that alone, I should have realized it was a bad sign. But I went to the doctor, and they told me, like, oh, I see that this is your first kid. I see that you're not married. I'm like, so what does that have to do with anything? That has nothing to do with why I am here. And they're like, well, you know, I'm sure, like, after this baby, you will want your tubes tied, because, you know, for your circumstances, it would be hard for you to raise more children after this one. And I'm like, what do you mean, my circumstances? Is it because I'm Black? And literally, like, I left. I did not go back to that doctor. My friends that have been pregnant and stuff, I told them never go to that place. Just never do it. Because that's one thing that some doctors do that people have told me about. They pressure women to either get on birth control, which is fine. It is your choice. It is your body, or get their tubes tied. But the fact that they are pressuring you to do this is wrong, and it's not right. And I'm glad that Sybil stood up and got an attorney for these girls, because the parents, once their dad and their grandmother found out what they had done to these children, they were in tears. Sybil was in tears. For you to do this to babies, for you to do this to children, or just to women, Black men, like, why? Why are you doing this? Why do you want control over people? Why? And so I found this book so empowering, because it tells you how this issue needs to still be talked about. And of course, with this Roe versus Wade thing, discussions need to be had. Like, I'm done with this country telling Black women, people of color, what they should and should not do with their bodies. I've had it. I'm done. And then to top it off, they're talking about banning books and stuff, but yet again, our kids can't be in a school and be safe. I'm done. Like, and can you ask yourself, like as a doctor or nurse, do you think it's okay? Like, do you really think it's okay to sterilize teenagers? And like I said, like, I had to read the author note first, because it makes it clear as day, because this author also she even says this discussion needs to keep happening and needs to constantly occur, because the same issues that happened, this is happening in 1973, is still happening in the year 2022. But of course, from this topic alone and how it's bringing up this issue in the US, of course, I'm giving it 5 out of 5 stars. And as far as the writing of this book is extraordinary. It's amazing. But I feel like I could relate to this book, because I'm one of the women where I was being pressured to be sterilized. Like, even when I had when I was in labor with my son, the nurses was hurting me, and I told them they were hurting me, and they still kept doing it. And so I told them I did not want that nurse in my room, in that room with me at all. And then the next nurse came in and they weren't hurting me. As a country, as human beings, we need to do something for this not to happen. And these are, and I know everyone has their own opinion, and you know, and that is fine. You have your right to your own opinion, but these are based on my experiences and my experiences alone. And for this book to talk about these 2 little girls being sterilized is just crazy to me. And then on top of that, with these sterilizations, there were side effects of how, and in the shots that they were given, it can cause cancer. And we find out in the book later on that India, the youngest, the 11-year-old, after years later, she does have cancer. When is this country going to wake up? I feel like after years later, she does have cancer. When is this country going to wake up? I feel like we're in a bad dream, and we can't wake up. How long will it take for someone to do something about this? How long will women, children have to suffer like this? This book, it did bring me to tears, but it speaks the truth of how this country has a lot of work to do. And then, you know, actually I'm tired of saying that they have a lot of work to do, because they've had these opportunities to stop things like this from happening, and they still allow it because they don't care. They only care about their own motives and their own agendas. They do not care about the American people. They do not care about Black, brown people. They do not care about Black or people of color, period. They do not. Like I said, they have their own agendas and motives to what they want to do in order to put money in their pockets, and to have control of people, to keep people in check. This book was great. And I know there are other books like this, but for me, just to read this book just now, it did come out last month in May. I wanted to read this book this month, and it's just disheartening how we still in the same place. I can't say there hasn't been any progress, but there needs to be more. It needs to be so much more. And I'm just over it, because it's like we have this government that we're supposed to trust and to help make sure we are protected, but we are not. We are not protected. And I feel like that's why a lot of women do have home births, because they can have control and a say on how and when they want to do things and stuff, as far as bringing their child into the world. And like I said, I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars because not only does it talks about this topic, this hard-hitting topic that needs to be discussed constantly and needs to be brought up on a regular basis. The writing was exquisite. I had no problems with this book, except the problems of this bad situation that's still happening to women. And I'm glad it brings it up in this book. It's hard-hitting, and it keeps it 100 about the U.S. and this country and what they're doing. Some people, they want to turn the other way and not talk about this, but it needs to be had. Like even this in the synopsis, which I will give to you right now. It says, Montgomery, Alabama, 1973. Fresh out of nursing school, Sybil Townsend intends to make a difference, especially in her African-American community. At the Montgomery Family Planning Clinic, she hopes to help women shape their destinies to make their own choices for their lives and bodies. But when her first week on the job takes her along a dusty country road to a worn-down one-room cabin, Sybil is shocked to learn that her new patients, Erica and India, are children, just 11 and 13 years old. Neither of the Williams sisters has even kissed a boy, but they are poor and black, and for those handling the family's welfare benefits, that's reason enough to have the girls on birth control. As Sybil grapples with her role, she takes India, Erica, and their family into her heart, until one day she arrives at their door to learn the unthinkable has happened and nothing will ever be the same for any of them. Decades later, with her daughter grown, a long career in her wake, Dr. Sybil Townsend is ready to retire, to find her peace, and to leave the past behind. But there are people and stories that refuse to be forgotten, that must not be forgotten. Because history repeats what we don't remember. Inspired by true events and brimming with hope, Take My Hand is a stirring exploration of accountability and redemption. And let me repeat the sentence once again. Because history repeats what we don't remember. And it's crazy to me because we talk about how they are constantly banning books, and most of these books talks about the past, and they refuse to, they say that, about race theory and all this and all that. They don't want kids to learn the history of this country. This country wants pretty much, they want what happened years and years ago put under the bridge and pushed off like it never happened, and it has happened, and it's still happening. That's the problem that I'm having. You want to ban these books so people can't educate themselves. You want to take away people's access to these books in libraries. Take away ebooks and stuff like that. Like, how disgusting can this country be? How disturbing. How literally it makes sometimes I'm embarrassed. I'm just embarrassed at this country. I really am. Like, for this country to be so influential and so rich, it's crazy how we're so behind on so many things. Like, we have all this wealth, but yet you still treated citizens like shit. I'm sorry. I'm just really passionate about this, and this book just hit it real hard for me, because I appreciated this book. I appreciate the message that it has within this book. I love the story because it gives you awareness of what is still happening today. But yeah, this book, I definitely recommend that you pick it up. I know, like I said, there are content warnings in this book, abortions, children, women being sterilized, eugenics, men being tested on. It's a lot in this book, but I appreciate this story and the awareness that it brings. That is my book review. I'm sorry that I got a little bit aggressive, and I'm just really passionate because this country, it's a piece of work. I really hope you enjoyed this book review. I know that I was really like I said, aggressive and stuff, but I'm really passionate because this country could be great. But in order for it to be great, you still got to remember the past and the history of this country and what we need to do for the future of this country and what we need to do for the future of our children in this country. But anyways, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope you enjoyed this book review. If you did, please, please, please give me a thumbs up. Also, hit that subscribe button and that bell to be notified when I upload more videos in the future. But thank you so much for watching, you guys, and please stay healthy and stay safe. See ya!